Hey YouTube, it's been a while since I've done one of these. Format is the same, but since I've been streaming all my games, I'm going to use some of the footage from my stream and go more in depth on decisions made in the game. In this game we're going to be playing as Krak, who can be either veterans or greatswords. The veteran matchup is essentially a buy, so we're going to assume that he's on greatswords until we have reason to believe otherwise. I don't have much experience playing against this deck, though from the little I've played it usually feels pretty bad. You're heavily reliant on your Axemen to get value, since your gold weather is so bad against the greatswords. We send away the Corsair, as we have no need for the res effect in round 1. Warship is then the best blacklist value in our hand, and we already have access to it should we need it to do the Pirate Captain. We really need to find Axemen against the Greatsword deck, since they have a couple ways to deal with a single Axemen, and their golden weather is actively bad in the matchup without an Axemen around. The hand is pretty much a disaster until we find that Axemen on the last mulligan. We draft pass against literally every deck on Bluecoin. For more information on why, you can read my Gwent DB guide on the deck. The draft pass for this deck is so good that you don't even care which side of the coin you're on most of the time. Seeing the Longship doesn't totally confirm he's on Greatsword, so he could be on some brew deck, but it's a pretty good indicator. We send back the Corsair, again not needing the res effect with no graveyard, and provides great blacklist value. We find the better of the two gold weathers, and we have 3 potential Axemen. Heim into Daran, Axemen himself, and Spearmaid into Axemen. Unfortunately, our Heim is likely to get reserved for Udalric, so we're really only at 2, potentially 1 if he guns Mandrake or Coral immediately when we play our Axemen. None of our other plays are great. We don't want Udalric until our opponent does. We don't yet know if we're going to turn this Heim into a Daran yet. Gold weather is useless against his Greatsword, and using Leader to kill Greatsword is a little too aggressive. Playing Spearmaiden removes any risk of Coral coming down to deny the second Axemen. These Axemen are also gaining passive value just off the ship, which is pretty nice. I'm much less sure about this play. There are a few options here I like. I could immediately gun Heim for Udalric. It puts me back effectively 24, but it breaks up the Greatsword combo. If he passes, I can almost certainly just take the round of Herald. This Warship is a lot of points, but I'm not convinced that it's not better to just get my Udalric down. My end goal in this round is to eventually have all of his Greatswords on one row, so he can't use them to tank the gold weather. Playing the weather now makes absolutely no sense, as the Greatswords are buffing over the Longships before the Rag ticks. The better play is probably just to drag the Greatsword into the back row now, and hold the weather into the following turn. I could also, again, just drop Udalric, which is even better this turn than it was before, since I can deny the pings on the Greatsword with it. If I Udalric in the middle between the ship and the sword, the ship will always be larger than the 10 power Greatsword by the time I get the Rag down, which effectively bricks the Greatsword without having to move it. He establishes another sword to tank the weather, so I move on with my plan of trying to get value out of the weather by dragging his middle sword to the back. A Greatsword on every row is pretty much a disaster for this deck to deal with. He finally reveals his Udalric, and we counter with ours. This is probably wrong, because there's not really much reason to play ours unless we're going to stay ahead of him. It's actually better to just hold it for round 3 to break up his Greatsword engine, or hold it until we're in a better position this round to actually win up a card. Just dragging his sword to the back is probably a better play here. He kills our Axemen, and we're in a much worse spot than we were a turn ago. He kills our second, and now our deck is looking pretty silly in comparison to his. We're pretty desperate to stay ahead, but at this point all hope is pretty much lost. We're stuck going into round 3 down a card against a pretty big Greatsword res. Our whole hand is worth practically no points, and this is the only way to take the round. We're down a card, we somehow managed to get out. Our position is probably bad enough we should just mulligan the Drought and hope to not draw the Whaler. We can't restore Pirate Captain if we take this line, but we can restore Spearmaiden, which isn't that much worse. And this Drought is pretty horrendous. It doesn't win us the game, but I think it gives us better odds. Lead on Drought, since everything else in our hand wants our opponent to have cards in play. It gets cleared, but whatever, it probably wasn't going to be worth that many points. Start taking the Burna. All the rest of our cards can pull stuff into the Storm, though we're 3v5 against the deck that doesn't really care. Opponent decides playing around an Axemen is better than taking a few free points by playing a sword into the Storm, which is probably correct. The rest of this game isn't really worth talking about. Our opponent has more cards and more points than us by a pretty huge margin. While I'm convinced we could have played round 2 better, it's likely that there's just no way we're beating double removal for our Axemen. Going into round 3 on even against Greatswords doesn't seem winnable, so I don't think getting Daran out is a real option. But an earlier Udalric may have been correct. Similarly, if we played Drought instead of Rag, we might have been better off with a naturally longer round 2, as the ships will typically stay smaller than the Greatswords over time, and less damage will be absorbed. My idea there was that I wanted to save the more valuable gold weather for round 3, it is probably much more important to just take round 2 up a card reliably. Anyways, if you enjoyed this game analysis, be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you notice any potential lines that I didn't go over, feel free to leave a comment below. There's a good chance I missed something. Until next time.